All right, so um, we've got this mountain of articles and notes all about AI and the future of work. Well, it's a lot to unpack. But the more we dig into it, the more interesting and maybe a little scary it gets.
Yeah.
So the big question seems to be, is AI going to become like, our awesome coworker? Or is it going to be the reason we all need to find a new job?
Well, it's interesting you say that because one of the things that really struck me was this idea of co-intelligence that Ethan Mollick talks about, where humans and AI are like working together.
Yeah, I saw that.
Yeah, he makes it sound like some kind of like, productivity dream team. But then reading some of these other sources, it feels like they're kind of pushing back on that. Like, hold up, Mollick, you might be missing something here.
Right.
They seem to be saying that his whole viewpoint is very academic, very, ivory tower, like he's not really in the trenches of the business world.
Yeah, it seems like they think he's a little detached from how things actually work.
Exactly. It almost reminds me of like critical race theory, right? Where it's this concept that comes from academics, but when you try to apply it to the real world, to like actual power structures and business,
Right.
it seems like they're on totally different planets.
Yeah.
What I found even more, well, kind of mind-blowing is that some of these sources are saying that AI is already doing things that people always thought only humans could do.
Oh, yeah. I saw that part too.
Like, for real?
It's crazy. Like, there are AI tools they talk about.
Yeah.
Claude and, what was the other one? Hume. I mean, these things can actually control operating systems, like switching between apps and generating reports.
Yeah, managing entire workflows even.
All the stuff that, like, you need a human brain for, supposedly.
It is. It's a lot to take in, especially with these new tools like Claude and Hume. Claude, like, it's this large language model from this company, Anthropic, and their focus is on making it helpful and harmless. But Hume, this one's from Google AI, and it's really good at, like, understanding and modeling how humans act. The fact that they can do these tasks now that we always thought you needed, knowledge workers for, I mean, it's a pretty clear sign of where things are headed.
It's both fascinating and terrifying all at the same time. And this is where I think those 4 stages of AI integration into the workforce that were in one of the articles really come into play, don't you think?
Oh, absolutely.
This is where it starts to feel very real.
Yeah, for sure. So the first stage basically describes AI as this kind of overseer, monitoring what humans are doing and giving them feedback and making suggestions.
So like an AI supervisor?
Kinda, but at least in the early stages, it's more like an assistant just trying to learn how things work.
Oh, okay. So like a digital mentor almost.
Yeah, exactly. But one that's constantly watching and analyzing everything you do.
Yeah.
And then we move into the second stage, the co-intelligence things that we were talking about earlier.
Yeah.
And this is where humans and AI are working together, side by side. Each one is contributing what they're good at. And humans are still in charge, making the decisions. But they're relying on AI to help them out with things like data analysis, doing research, and even some of the decision-making even.
Okay, so far so good. I mean, we're still the ones calling the shots.
Right.
We're just getting some AI assistance, basically. But if I remember correctly, what the sources were saying is that's not really where this whole thing ends, is it?
That's just the beginning.
Okay, so what happens next?
And that's where that whole self-checkout analogy comes in, remember?
Some things at the grocery store.
Exactly. Remember how they used to be like so clunky and they would always mess up and like you'd always have to have someone there to fix it?
Oh, yeah, totally.
But then over time they got more sophisticated, way more reliable, and eventually they didn't need nearly as many humans around to like supervise them, right?
I see where you're going with this. They're saying that the same thing is basically going to happen with AI in the workplace.
Exactly.
Gotcha.
So like in that third stage, AI starts to take on more and more responsibility.
Right.
It can handle more complex tasks without needing as much human supervision. So you might have one human overseeing like a whole bunch of AI workers that are each doing the work of what used to be a whole team of people.
Just like one cashier monitoring a whole row of self-checkouts.
Yeah.
And they're saying that this isn't like some far-off sci-fi future we're talking about here.
No.
This is happening now.
It's happening now or like right around the corner.
Wow.
And it's moving fast. Like the speed that AI is developing at, it's just incredible. Things that seems like they were like, decades away just a couple years ago are now like becoming reality. And then you get to that fourth stage. And at that point, AI needs like hardly any human oversight at all.
Wow. And so what, everyone's out of a job?
One of the sources throughout this potential ratio, like 1 human manager for every 16 AI workers.
16 to 1.
Yeah, think about that.
That's a lot of people out of work.
It's a staggering number of jobs that could be displaced, And the really scary part is it's not just like, factory workers or blue-collar jobs.
Right.
This is coming for everyone. Even those jobs that we always thought were like safe from automation, the sources were very clear about that. We were talking about how even those jobs that everyone thought were safe are going to be impacted.
Yeah.
Like some of the sources were talking about how AI can already like crank out academic papers, write creative content, and, like do some pretty crazy data analysis.
Right, like even those jobs that require creativity and critical thinking, they're not safe.
Apparently not.
I was kind of hoping that like those fields might be immune to this whole AI takeover, but it's really starting to feel like a tidal wave that's just going to wipe everything out.
The sources, yeah, they weren't sugarcoating it, that's for sure. One of them even used the phrase inevitable transformation.
No, wow.
It really does seem like no matter what you do for a living, this is going to impact you. Fewer jobs, way more automation, and you might even end up having to report to like an AI supervisor, which...
yeah, that's kind of a scary thought.
Yeah, it paints a pretty stark picture of what the future could look like. So, okay, we've talked about how this AI revolution is coming, and it's probably going to, like, really shake things up.
Right.
But, like, what does that even mean for the future of work? Like, what happens when millions of jobs just, like, disappear?
Yeah, what do we all do? Become baristas or something?
Right. That's the, like, million-dollar question, isn't it?
It is.
And the sources, to be honest, they don't really give us any easy answers. Like, if most jobs, as we know them, are just going to vanish, that means the way our whole society is set up, which is, like, based on the idea of work and careers and, making a living, all that stuff, that's all going to have to change, like, big time.
Right. Like, our entire economic system is based on this idea that there will always be jobs.
Exactly.
But what if that's not true anymore? Like, what happens to the idea of career when the careers themselves are gone?
Exactly. And it's not just about like the economics of it all,
Right.
It's like, what happens to people, socially? What happens when you have millions of people who are suddenly out of work? I mean, how do we even begin to deal with that kind of upheaval?
That's a really good question.
Yeah. And from what I've seen, the sources are saying that this is going to be a really rough transition.
Yeah.
And that, like, we're not even remotely prepared for it.
It's pretty overwhelming to think about. I mean, we've already seen what automation has done to certain industries like manufacturing.
Right.
But this is like a whole other level. This isn't just about robots replacing factory workers.
No.
We're talking about lawyers and doctors and accountants, even, artists and writers, like potentially everyone.
Yeah, it's like this fundamental shift in how humans and technology relate to each other.
Oh.
Some people, I guess, are holding on to this idea that, we'll just invent new jobs.
Right.
New industries that we can't even imagine yet. But that seems like kind of a long shot, don't you think?
Yeah. I mean, it sounds nice, but is it realistic?
Yeah, like, even if we could come up with all these new jobs, how do we make sure everyone has the skills to do them? And, like, what about all the people who are out of work while we're figuring all that out?
Right. It's a huge problem.
It's like we're talking about this potential crisis, the likes of which we've never seen.
Yeah.
And it's not like some far-off threat.
It's happening right now.
Right now.
And it's just gaining momentum.
Yeah, and I think one of the points the sources were making that's really important is that we've been focusing on the wrong things. Like, we've been so caught up in how amazing AI is and all the cool things it can do that we've kind of forgotten about the human side of things.
It's like we got so excited about this shiny new toy that we didn't even stop to think about what could happen if we, just unleash it on the world without a plan.
Exactly.
And now we're, like, running out of time to figure it out.
We really need to start asking ourselves some tough questions, like about what kind of future we want, or, what kind of future is being built for us,
Yeah.
What role do we want AI to play? How do we protect people?
Right.
Not just the ones who can adapt to this new reality, but everyone. Because right now, it looks like the future is going to happen whether we like it or not.
And it's not looking good.
No.
It's one thing to read about all of this, but it's a whole other thing to actually wrap your head around the fact that everything we know about, like, work and careers and how our whole society works is about to be turned upside down.
Yeah, the solutions are pretty much saying we need to have the serious conversation about, like, the future of work, AI, and what kind of society we even want to live in.
Right.
But those are, like, really uncomfortable conversations to have, and I'm not even sure they're happening on a big enough scale yet.
So Where do we go from here? I mean, we've talked about all these potential problems like jobs disappearing and the economy going haywire and all this social upheaval. But is there like anything we can do to, get ready for this AI future that seems to be barreling toward us?
The sources, to be honest, they don't really offer a lot of solutions.
Hmm.
It's like they almost suggest that even trying to come up with solutions might be pointless.
Really?
Yeah. It's like we're so busy trying to fix things and make a plan that we're not seeing the bigger picture.
So what, we just like accept that this is happening and there's nothing we can do about it? That's kind of depressing.
It's not about just accepting it passively.
Yeah.
It's about understanding how big this shift really is
Right.
and how all our old ways of thinking are just not going to cut it anymore.
Mm.
The systems we've built, our economic models, our education systems, our social safety nets, all of that, it's all based on a world that's disappearing.
Okay, so then what are we supposed to do?
Right. And all the solutions that people keep talking about, like a universal basic income and retraining programs and, creating new jobs.
Right.
The sources are saying that those ideas, they're all based on this assumption that the basic structure of our society is going to stay the same.
Yeah.
But what if it doesn't?
What if that's not how it goes?
Yeah, what if we're not just dealing with an economic shift, but a total paradigm shift in how we live and work and what it even means to be human?
Wow, yeah, it's like the ground is shifting under our feet
Yeah.
and we're trying to build a house on a foundation that's like crumbling. That's a pretty scary thought.
It is. And the more we try to hang on to those old ways of thinking, the harder it's going to be to, deal with this transition. The sources, they talk about how we need to totally reimagine how our society works, but they don't really give us any concrete answers.
So is that it? We're doomed?
I don't know if doomed is the right word.
Okay, but it's not looking good.
No, but it's more about recognizing that the future isn't something that just happens to us, we create it.
Yeah.
But the tools that we use to create the future in the past, like our institutions, our academic systems, even, just our belief in progress, all of that might not be enough anymore.
We've always thought that technology would make our lives better, easier, but what if we were wrong? What if the future that technology is building isn't one that we even want to live in?
That's the question that we all need to be asking, both as individuals and as a society. What kind of future do we want? And how do we build it in a world where the very idea of work, of what's valuable, of what it means to be human is changing?
Wow. I think you've given us a lot to think about. Even if the answers aren't exactly, comforting, feels like we're at the end of our deep dive here and not really with any sense of closure.
Yeah.
More just like a Dave sense of unease.
Yeah, a lot to ponder.
Thanks for, coming along for the ride. And to everyone listening out there, I guess the only advice we can give is stay curious, stay informed, and maybe, just maybe, stay human.